And yet it moves. Galileo responded, staring across the courtroom at Pope Paul V, who had brought the weight of the Italian Inquisition down on Galileo for contradicting what was then a widely held belief that the earth was fixed and everything rotated around it. Well, today we think of Galileo as the father of the scientific revolution. But we forget that in the 16th century, Galileo was a heretic. During his trial, when his accusers claimed that the earth was fixed and everything revolved around it, Galileo said no, it moves. He contradicted the strong precedent of the day. And yet, in spite of what the learned people were saying, in spite of what the texts were teaching, Galileo had a different view. He had observed with his own eyes something completely different. Using his telescope, he looked out to the same sky that generations of people had looked at before, but he saw something completely different. And seeing what he saw, he produced for us a groundbreaking truth that we are not the center of the universe. And for that, he spent the rest of his life under house arrest. Now, how do we embrace this Galilean spirit in our own lives? I think about it from one dimension, which is the dimension of the economic policymaker. Now, of course, economic policymaking is rooted in a deep respect for facts and analysis. And the way it typically works is that data is collected, data is aggregated, data is analyzed, theories are produced, and policy options are derived from what that analysis looks like. The stream moves pretty steadily from data to aggregation of data, to facts, to analysis, to policy options. And in this way, economic theories are produced. Over time, the data changes. New data points emerge, and yet these theories are still in place and being looked at the same way. Now, the behavioral economists call this confirmation bias, right? And this is the phenomenon by which new data points are emerging, but it's only the existing theories that become the cornerstone of what we believe. Signs may be pointing a different way, but we toss them aside if we have confirmation bias because we believe that they are not supporting the theories that we hold. This, of course, has big consequences for economic policymakers, because if we don't pull in the new data points, the signs along the path, what are we doing in terms of optimizing our policy prescriptions? So I'm thinking about how to combat this confirmation bias. What can we do to avoid it? Well, we start by taking on a disposition of observing more around us and experiencing data in a way perhaps that we're not that accustomed to, a new way, a way in which we actually attempt to immerse ourselves in the problems at hand. Now, think about it. Traditional data has a very hard time quantifying the human toll of, say, a financial crisis. For example, how do we quantify the stress involved in losing a home? How do we quantify the anxiety that's produced in looking for a new job? How do we quantify the pressure that you feel in figuring out which debts you're going to pay off first. The importance of embracing, though, these unquantifiable data sets is absolutely imperative if we're going to create policy options that work for people. Now, of course, everybody in this room, does different things. People are creating and designing products, services, policies, creations that impact human people. That is the point. But as we do this effort, what is it that we're choosing to bring in to our observation set to actually create optimal products, services, policies for others? Well, I think about it from a couple of angles, and here are a couple of anecdotes that come to mind for me. So it's 2008, and it is the midst of the mortgage crisis. People are losing homes, people are being laid off, businesses aren't hiring. There's a general state of confusion, of despair. Confidence is low. But the general feeling is that we're going to get over this crisis, that it's a contained event, a self-contained event. Well, I'm driving to Baltimore because at that time I'm the Commissioner of Financial Regulation for the state of Maryland, and I find when I'm driving this particular route, I always pass a certain intersection, and I never get through the green light. I'm always stuck, for whatever reason, at the red light. And when I get stuck there, one day in, I notice telephone poles. And on the telephone poles, I see a couple of those signs. And I think, oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure I saw those signs yesterday, but I definitely see 3 signs today. And these are signs like, 1-800-NEED-HELP, 1-800-NEED cash, 1-800-sell house, those kinds of signs. Anyway, the next day, driving again to Baltimore, passing the same intersection, stopped at the same red light, and I look around and actually the 3 signs have become 6 signs. There are now 6 signs on these poles, and I'm thinking that's really interesting, but again, the same exact character of the signs. Next day, the number of signs increases. By the end of the week, the telephone poles are completely blanketed with these signs. And I'm thinking, what does this mean? What does this mean about whether or not our financial crisis is going to be contained? And what it meant, and what I took from it to mean, was that there was a general sense that systems weren't working for people, that the usual mechanisms by which people would be able to recover from our crisis actually were not operating well. And people were turning to places that actually generally don't do them any good at all, but needed a place where they could start to understand how to restructure their mortgage, how to actually talk to their banker, how to get themselves back on their feet after having lost a job. Another example. So it's 2012, and I'm again in my car. This time I'm driving to the Federal Reserve Board in Washington. And as I am driving there, thinking through actually our aggregate data sets, which produce for us a sense of unemployment figures, statistics about labor market mobility, and typically we're feeling like the number of jobs is increasing, and this is a good thing. We are moving through the crisis. The number of jobs is increasing. That is a good thing. People have more spending power. Firms are hiring, and I'm feeling actually okay. But as I'm driving in, I pass another sign. It's not one of these 1-800 signs this time. It's a sign that says job fair this way. And it's a sign that I think, I'm going to go check out this job fair and see what it's all about. And so I follow the signs, and they lead me to our local community college, which in fact is having a job fair right in its cafeteria. So I get out of my car, go into the cafeteria, and start to start to scope out the jobs that are being offered at this particular fair, and thinking I'm going to use this as a good opportunity to actually, count different kinds of jobs. Well, immediately I see that the jobs being offered actually fall into particular buckets. There's a whole host of booths that are set up to offer people jobs as restaurant workers. There's another set of booths being set up, or that are set up for offering people jobs in the military. And there's a third set of booths that seem to be focused on swimming pools. Turns out that there seemed to be high demand for lifeguards, and didn't think of, being a lifeguard required a college degree, but hey, these were the kinds of jobs that I saw being offered, and I thought this is not a particularly great sign that these are the jobs being offered, and I decide I'm going to leave the job fair and start to walk out, and as I do, something catches my eye, which is a sign on a booth that says, IT jobs, jobs of the future. And I thought, yes, of course. This is really the kind of job that I would imagine would be a job that would be sustaining, a job that is a career, a job that actually people are looking for. And I approached the booth, and actually a woman comes out from behind the booth and says, "Are you looking for a job?" And I said, well, yes, I guess I am. And she said, okay, well, are you ready to submit your resume to our database? And I said, your database? The way you apply for a job is, she said, you put your resume into our database and we'll contact you if we're able to make a match. And I said, make a match? She said, yeah, well, the resume that you put into the database gets screened by an algorithm, and we determine whether the features of your resume will match a government contract that we're pursuing. And I thought, wow, this really isn't what I thought the labor market was looking like. I said, oh, do I then have the opportunity to put my resume into many different databases? And she said, oh, no. Can't do that. One database. You choose one database because you're going to sign a binding letter of intent that you have only applied to one database, and you will wait to hear. And I said, oh, well, can you tell me a little bit about the salary? And she said, well, it's not an annual salary. We pay by the hour. And I said, benefits? She said, well, the benefits, folded into what we pay by the hour. So this turned out to be an important set of signals to me. These signals were signals that actually, more than the quantity of jobs mattered for our aggregate data set, it's the quality of the jobs. And there was also a light that I saw enhanced in this experience, which of course was this notion of discouraged workers who realized that the job market is too burdensome to actually try to navigate, or that the jobs themselves were really not worth pursuing in terms of being able to move back into the labor force. So again, an example of seeing something that enhanced the data set, enhanced the way in which we are looking at what typically are theories. So data aggregation actually presents a set of challenges for policymakers. And it's Galileo, really, who reminds us of the power of observation and the power of bringing in new data to enhance the development of theory and then the ultimate policy decision-making. In this way, the routine is actually revolutionary. So, today, for example, here we all are in this beautiful space, being able to think big thoughts from diverse fields in a multidisciplinary open way, challenging new questions. But when we leave here, when we step outside this beautiful space and look to the sky or look around us, what data points will we absorb? What data points will we choose to challenge our own deeply held assumptions and beliefs? Thank you.